The Thorne estate was more fortress than home, its stone walls rising above the misty hills like a monument to wealth itself. Inside the grand hall, every detail screamed luxury. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light across polished marble floors. Velvet drapes hung like stage curtains, muffling the April wind outside. Guests, heirs, investors, distant cousins, moved like performers at a gala, their silk dresses shimmering, their diamonds catching the light, every smile rehearsed, every gesture deliberate. This was not just a will reading, it was a battlefield. Where appearances were weapons and greed was the prize, into this world stepped someone who didn't fit the script. A woman modestly dressed, gray linen clinging softly to her frame, a cardigan faded from years of wear draped across her shoulders. Her shoes were quiet flats, unpolished but practical. Her dark hair was pulled into a low bun, a few strands, framing a face unadorned by makeup. No glittering necklace, no designer heels, no branded bag swinging at her side. Only a plain cloth bag, worn but clean, hung from her shoulder. The moment she entered, the atmosphere shifted, heads turned, eyes narrowed. Whispers spread like wildfire across the marble hall. "Who is she?" Someone muttered behind a jeweled hand. "A maid, maybe?" Another chuckled. "Looks like she's wandered in from the staff kitchen." A younger cousin sneered, champagne glass tilted carelessly. The cruelty grew bolder when Preston Thorne, Logan's second cousin, broad-shouldered and arrogant in a gold tie, stepped forward with a smirk. His Rolex flashed as he gestured toward the newcomer. "Who let the cleaning staff in?" he barked, his voice carrying easily in the cavernous room. A ripple of laughter followed, sharp and brittle like glass breaking. Marissa, his sister in a crimson gown, tossed her hair and added, "Maybe she's here to dust the will before it's read." More laughter erupted, each chuckle a dagger meant to humiliate. But the woman didn't flinch. She didn't argue, didn't lower her eyes. She simply adjusted the strap of her bag and stepped quietly toward the back corner, choosing a spot near a tall window that framed the mist outside. To them, she was invisible, an outsider. But the truth was far greater. They thought she didn't belong. But they were wrong. The laughter that followed Preston's words had an edge to it, too sharp, too eager. The sound bounced off marble and chandelier crystal, filling the hall like broken glass scattered across a polished floor. The simple woman, Ivy, stayed still at the back near the tall window, the misty hills behind her the only softness in the room. But the crowd wasn't done with her. Marissa Thorne, Preston's sister, moved across the room in a crimson silk dress that swished like a warning. Her heels clicked against marble, each step calculated. She stopped just short of Ivy, towering over her smaller frame, her perfume strong enough to sting. With a dramatic flick of her manicured hand, Marissa tugged at Ivy's cardigan as if it were something pulled from a donation bin. "This isn't a soup kitchen," Marissa announced, her voice loud enough to carry across the room. "Why don't you leave before you embarrass yourself further?" The crowd chuckled on cue. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter spilling out in sharp bursts. No one corrected her. No one defended Ivy. The silence of the bystanders was as cruel as the words of the taunters. Across the room, Clara Evans, a niece with too much money and too little kindness, lifted her phone, her long nails flashing under the chandelier light. Beside her, Elise, a former assistant turned hanger-on, leaned close. "Smile," Clara whispered mockingly, snapping a photo of Ivy as she stood quietly with her bag. Within seconds, the screen lit up with hashtags. Thorne will flop, found Logan's. Charity case crashing the will reading. Guess she thinks thrift store chic gets her $1 billion. Elise giggled, leaning against Clara's shoulder as they added captions. "This is going to go viral," Elise whispered. "It already is," Clara smirked, tilting her phone so Ivy could see her own photo glowing back at her. The laughter around them swelled, emboldened by the cruelty now spreading beyond the room. Phones buzzed as more heirs joined in, liking and sharing the mockery. For them, it wasn't enough to laugh in Ivy's face. They wanted the world to laugh with them. Ivy did not react. Her hazel eyes only flickered once, catching the glow of Clara's screen, but her face remained calm. She didn't flinch, didn't speak. To the room, her silence looked like weakness. To Ivy, it was a shield. Trevor Lang, a cousin in a velvet blazer, decided to add his own joke. With a sly grin, he scribbled the words charity case on a cocktail napkin. Moving casually, he drifted behind Ivy and tucked the napkin into the strap of her plain cloth bag. The bold letters stuck out, bright and humiliating, like a brand burned into fabric. The crowd erupted. Snickers, whispers, hands covering mouths, in mock surprise. Clara snapped another photo, her phone shaking with laughter as she whispered, "She's a walking joke now." More glasses clinked, more cruel chuckles filled the room. "She's got some nerve staying here," muttered Gerald Hayes, an old investor whose pinstriped suit stretched against his heavy frame. His wife, dripping in emeralds, shook her head. "No class. Just standing here is disrespectful to Logan's memory." And so, the circle of humiliation closed in. Every whisper, every sneer, every cruel glance was designed to strip Ivy of dignity until she broke. But Ivy did not break. Her hands rested steady on her bag. Her shoulders remained straight, her breathing calm. She did not look at Marissa, at Clara, at Trevor. She kept her eyes fixed on the empty chair at the front of the room where the lawyer would soon sit. The others mistook her stillness for fragility, mistook her silence for surrender. They laughed louder, certain she was too timid, too poor, too small to fight back. What they didn't see, what none of them could imagine, was that Ivy's silence was not weakness. It was strength, a quiet, unshakable strength waiting for its moment. And when that moment came, their laughter would choke in their throats. The chatter, the laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, everything stopped the moment the tall, oak doors swung open. A hush fell across the grand hall as Arthur Grayson entered. He was not a man easily ignored. In his early 60s, his gray suit was pressed to perfection, his leather briefcase polished, his presence commanding. Decades of handling fortunes and feuds had etched quiet authority into the lines of his face. Even the boldest heirs shifted in their seats when his eyes swept the room. Grayson walked with measured steps to the head of the long mahogany table. He placed the heavy briefcase down with a deliberate click, the sound sharp in the silence. The crowd leaned forward, greedy, anticipation practically humming in the air. Here it was, the moment they had dressed for, schemed for, flown across continents for. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grayson began, his voice steady and resonant, "we are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of Logan Alexander Thorne." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Logan's jet had disappeared 6 months ago, presumed lost over the Pacific. No wreckage, no body, just endless headlines and whispers. Many hoped, most assumed, but now the weight of his absence pressed into the room like stone. Grayson opened the briefcase, drew out a single sealed envelope, and broke the wax seal. The crack echoed, loud as a gunshot in the silence. He unfolded the paper and began to read. "I, Logan Alexander Thorne, being of sound mind, declare this my final will." The room held its breath. Diamonds glittered, pearls trembled, silk rustled. "To my family, colleagues, and associates," Grayson continued, "I leave nothing but this truth. Wealth reveals character, not worth." A confused silence, then scoffs. Preston's smirk faltered. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. Clara frowned. "All my assets," Grayson pressed on. "All company shares, properties, accounts, and intellectual rights are bequeathed to one person, the one who stood by me for no reason other than love, the one who never asked my net worth, never sought my name for status." He paused deliberately, letting the silence sharpen. "My wife, Ivy." The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts, disbelieving laughter. "Wife? Logan was married?" Preston barked. "This is absurd." Marissa clutched her crimson gown, her face pale. "A fraud! A scam!" Gerald thundered, his voice booming like a gavel. "She's tricked you! She's tricked us all!" Lillian cried, her pearls rattling against her throat. Phones flashed as Clara and Elise fired off texts. their manicured nails trembling. "A wife? This has to be fake," Clara hissed. "No one's ever seen her." Grayson, unfazed by the storm, reached calmly back into his briefcase. "The will is legal," he said firmly. "Signed and notarized. Supporting documents are available for verification." He laid the evidence before them. A photograph first. Logan, smiling, his arm around Ivy in a simple white dress. The date on the back read 7 years ago. Gasps again, this time sharper, cutting into the doubt. Then a marriage certificate, signed by Logan Thorne and Ivy Clark, with witnesses Sarah Ellis, a nurse, and Michael Reed, a librarian. Next, a series of handwritten letters. Logan's handwriting unmistakable, verified by forensic experts. Words of affection, gratitude, private thoughts never meant for headlines. And finally, bank records showing joint accounts, carefully hidden from public view at Logan's request. The room fell into chaos. Some shouted, some whispered furiously. Others sat frozen. Gerald's voice rose above the din. "This is a forgery. Logan would never tie himself to her." He pointed an accusing finger toward Ivy, who stood silently at the back, her eyes steady, her hands calm on the strap of her bag. "She's probably got a fake ID in there," his wife snapped, emeralds glinting under the chandelier. A gold digger, nothing more. But the proof lay on the table, undeniable, unshakable. The crowd's outrage grew louder, not because they believed the evidence was false, but because they feared it was real. Because if it was real, then everything, every estate, every company share, every jewel, belonged to the quiet woman they had mocked. And through it all, Ivy remained still. Her silence was no longer just composure, it was a weight, a presence, a calm the storm could not touch. Grayson folded his hands, his gaze sweeping the room. "You may protest," he said, his tone like iron, "but the truth does not bend to greed. Logan Thorne's will is clear." The laughter that had mocked Ivy minutes ago was gone. What filled the hall now was disbelief, outrage, and a fear none dared name aloud. Because the woman they had humiliated was the one who owned everything. The grand hall simmered with disbelief. Proofs lay scattered across the mahogany table. Photographs, certificates, handwritten letters. Yet the heirs clung to denial like drowning men clutching driftwood. Voices overlapped, sharp and frantic. "This is forged," Gerald barked, his pinstripe suit creasing as he jabbed a finger toward the lawyer. "She's lying," Lillian cried, pearls trembling at her throat. "Logan would never marry someone like that," Marissa hissed, her crimson dress flaring as she moved closer, eyes flashing with venom. In the back corner, the simple woman remained still. Her hands rested lightly on her cloth bag, her posture calm, her gaze unshaken. She had endured whispers, laughter, insults sharp enough to cut skin, and now, as the storm reached its peak, she moved. The sound of her footsteps was almost imperceptible. Flats, brushing marble, soft and steady. Yet the room fell silent, as if the air itself had been pulled taut. Every eye followed her as she crossed the floor. Her gray dress swayed gently, her cardigan slipping slightly from one shoulder, her presence commanding in its simplicity. She stopped at the head of the table beside Grayson. The lawyer inclined his head in a gesture of quiet respect, then stepped back, letting her stand in the light of the chandeliers. For the first time, the woman spoke. "I am Ivy Clark," she said, her voice calm, low, steady, like a bell sounding through fog. "Logan's wife." Gasps echoed, some sharp, some mocking. Preston barked a laugh, brittle and forced. "Wife? You?" He gestured to her cardigan, his gold tie glinting under the lights. "Logan Thorne, married to this? Don't insult us." Others joined, their nervous laughter rattling against the high ceilings. Clara folded her arms, smirking. "A nice performance, but we're not buying it. If you're really his wife, why hide? Why come dressed like that? You expect us to believe a billionaire chose thrift store chic?" Marissa leaned forward, her crimson nails gleaming. "You're just Another gold digger, admit it. Ivy's hazel eyes swept the room. She didn't blink, didn't falter. Her silence cut deeper than words until at last she spoke again. I didn't come for money, she said. Each word was deliberate, weighted. I came to see who you really were. To see which of you cared for Logan the man, not his fortune. The hall stirred uncomfortably. Some scoffed, some shifted in their seats, but no one dared interrupt. Her voice held them not with volume, but with truth. You showed me. Ivy continued, her gaze steady. Every insult, every laugh, every whisper, you revealed yourselves. For a moment, silence pressed down on the room. Then Preston broke it with a bark of cruel laughter. This is pathetic. A sob story won't make you one of us. Nervous chuckles followed. Airs clinging to mockery because the alternative, the possibility she spoke the truth, terrified them. Ivy didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag, her fingers brushing against a small device. She lifted it, a sleek black remote, and pressed a button. A click echoed in the hall. On the far wall, a hidden monitor flickered to life. Static first, then an image sharpened into view. The room gasped as one. It was Logan Thorne. Alive. He sat in a dimly lit study, lean and sharp-eyed, streaks of gray threading his dark hair. His presence filled the screen, calm but unyielding like a judge seated high above. The timestamp in the corner glowed. April 15th, 2025. The feed was live. Chaos erupted. Marissa staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth. Clara dropped her phone, the screen cracking against marble. Gerald's wife clutched his arm, whispering frantically, "No. No, it can't be." Preston stumbled, his gold tie suddenly garish, his smirk gone. This is some trick," he shouted, though his voice wavered. On screen, Logan leaned forward, his blue eyes piercing as if he could see each of them through the lens. His voice rolled through the hall, deep and steady. "You thought I was gone," he said. "You thought this was your chance to carve my life into pieces. But I have been here, watching, listening. Every word, every sneer, every lie." Gasps filled the room, airs shrinking under the invisible weight of his gaze. Ivy's lips curved, just slightly. Not a smile, but a quiet acknowledgement. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. For the first time, it was not Ivy who looked out of place. It was them. The glittering heirs in their diamonds and silk suddenly looked small, fragile, desperate. Because the woman they had mocked, humiliated, dismissed as nothing, was not only Logan's wife. She was the one standing beside him. The room was no longer buzzing with chatter or laughter. It was paralyzed. All eyes locked on the glowing monitor at the far end of the hall where Logan Thorne's face stared back at them. Alive, undeniable, real. The man they had mourned, the man they had secretly hoped to inherit from, was very much alive. He sat in a simple chair inside a dimly lit study, the background lined with bookshelves and shadows. No extravagant display, no attempt at spectacle, just Logan himself, lean and sharp-eyed, his presence filling the room even from miles away. His dark hair was streaked with gray, his jaw set with quiet authority. Then he spoke. "I've been watching everything." His voice rolled across the grand hall, low and steady but heavy as a verdict. "Every word, every sneer, every laugh at my wife's expense. Ivy warned me this would happen, that the moment you saw someone you didn't recognize, you would show your true colors." She was right. The words hit like thunder. Clara gasped, clutching her broken phone. Gerald's wife buried her face in her emerald-ringed hands. Marissa swayed on her heels, crimson fabric trembling like fire in the wind. Preston tried to speak but only managed a strangled sound, his gold tie suddenly suffocating him. The silence that followed was unbearable. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. The chandeliers seemed to hold their light more tightly, as if the air itself was waiting. Then, the sound of doors opening. Two guards stepped aside, and through the tall, oak entryway walked a figure that froze every soul in place. Logan Thorne. Not on a screen. Not a ghost or a rumor. Real. Alive. Solid. He wore no designer suit, no expensive tie. Just a simple dark jacket, shoes scuffed from travel, and the kind of presence that needed no polish to dominate a room. Each step echoed against the marble floor, heavy and final, as if time itself had slowed to honor his return. The crowd parted instinctively. Relatives who had been clutching champagne glasses now clutched each other, pulling back as he passed. The arrogance that had filled the hall earlier dissolved into fear, shame, and disbelief. Logan's eyes swept across them, unblinking. One by one he saw them all, their jeweled hands, their trembling smiles, their greedy hearts laid bare. Finally, his gaze found Ivy. She stood waiting for him, calm as ever. For the first time since entering the room, her composure softened. Logan's hand brushed hers, a quiet anchor, a silent promise. The crowd saw it, the unspoken bond stronger than any fortune. The air inside the grand hall felt heavier than marble, every breath strained under the weight of Logan's words. The airs, once bold, glittering, and loud, now sat in stunned silence. Ivy stood beside Logan, her quiet strength radiating like an unshakable crown. Arthur Grayson, the lawyer, stepped forward once more. His face was unreadable, his tone precise, his words deliberate. He opened a second folder from his briefcase. "There is an addendum to the will," he announced, his voice echoing off polished stone and chandelier glass. "Effective immediately, anyone who insulted Mrs. Ivy Thorne today, verbally, physically, or through digital means, will be disinherited. They forfeit all shares, all properties, and all financial ties to the Thorne estate." The silence broke into gasps. Several guests half rose from their chairs, their jewelry clinking like shackles. Grayson's eyes swept the room before returning to the list in his hand. The names are as follows: Preston Thorne, Marissa Thorne, Clara Evans, Gerald Hayes, Lillian Ward, Trevor Lang. The words landed like hammer strikes. Preston shot to his feet, face red, gold tie askew. "This is outrageous," he shouted. "I am blood, you can't cut me off." His voice cracked with desperation, the arrogance drained from it. But before he could say more, two guards appeared at his side. Their grip was firm, but calm as they led him toward the door. He struggled, his voice echoing down the hall. "Logan, come on, we're family." Logan's reply was steady, cold as stone. "Family doesn't mock my wife." The crowd watched, frozen, as Preston was dragged out, the first to fall. Next came Clara. Her phone buzzed violently in her hand, screen lighting up with notifications. She glanced down, her face draining of color. Her followers were abandoning her in real time, sponsors severing contracts, her empire of influence collapsing before her eyes. Posts vanished, comments turned cruel, the digital throne she had built, crumbling in minutes. No, this can't be happening," she whispered, fingers trembling as she tried to refresh. But the numbers dropped faster, each ping of her phone another nail in the coffin. A guard took her arm. Clara clutched her cracked screen to her chest, tears streaking her makeup as she was led away. Lillian Ward gasped as her pearls snapped, scattering across the marble floor. The sound was sharp, final, like bones breaking. She dropped to her knees, scrambling to collect them, but the guards were already at her side. Her emerald earrings glittered mockingly as she cried out, "Logan, you can't mean this." "I've been loyal for years." Logan's gaze was unflinching. "Loyalty doesn't call my wife classless." Lillian's sobs echoed as she was pulled to her feet, pearls crunching beneath heels as she was escorted out. Trevor tried to laugh it off, his voice strained and hollow. "It was just a joke, Logan. A bit of fun." She didn't even notice. His velvet blazer shimmered under the lights, but there was no confidence left in him. The guards closed in, their shadows falling over him like a verdict. "Wait, please," Trevor pleaded. But his words only bounced back to him, hollow and powerless. Marissa stood frozen, crimson gown trembling. She pressed her hands to her mouth, then dropped them with a sob. "You can't do this. I'm your cousin, Logan. You know me." Her voice broke, desperation spilling out as guards reached for her arms. She twisted away, her heels scraping against marble, her perfume cloying. In the heavy air, "I didn't mean it, I swear." But Logan didn't look at her. Ivy's silence was answer enough. Marissa's cries echoed as she was led out, her gown trailing behind like spilled blood. Gerald Hayes tried one last defiance, his booming voice filling the hall. "You're tearing this family apart, Logan, over her?" But his protest rang hollow. His wife clung to him, emeralds flashing desperately, until guards pulled them both away. His shouts grew smaller with every step until the doors closed with a final thud. The hall was still again. The crowd that remained sat pale and trembling, the echo of footsteps and sobs lingering like ghosts. The pearls still glittered on the floor, the napkin-marked charity case crumpled near a chair. Clara's cracked phone lying forgotten in a corner. Symbols of cruelty turned into evidence of justice. Logan stood tall, his hand brushing Ivy's. She did not need to speak. Her silence, once mocked, now ruled the room. Justice had arrived, and it had Ivy's name written all over it. Logan turned back to face the hall. His voice needed no microphone, no amplification. It carried rich and steady to every corner. This was a test. He let the words sink in, his gaze cutting through silk, velvet, and gold as if stripping them bare. A test Ivy designed. To see if you would honor my memory or claw at my fortune. To see who would treat a stranger with kindness and who would tear her down for sport. He paused, his eyes hardening. And all of you failed. The words cracked across the hall like a whip. Some flinched, some bowed their heads, others opened their mouths only to close them again, choked by guilt and disbelief. Preston shook his head, desperate. "Logan, listen. We didn't know. She didn't say anything." Logan's gaze snapped to him, cold and final. "She shouldn't have had to. You saw a woman you didn't recognize and your first instinct was to mock her, to humiliate her. That is not family. That is not loyalty." Preston stumbled back, his voice shrinking. The crowd turned to stone, no one daring to interrupt. Logan stepped forward, his presence towering despite the simplicity of his clothes. "I built this empire with sweat and sacrifice, not so it could become a feeding ground for parasites. Wealth was never meant to reveal greed, but it always does. Today you showed me exactly who you are." His words echoed through the grand hall, each syllable sharp as glass. The heirs who had laughed so freely before now trembled under his judgment. Their silks, their diamonds, their arrogance, all of it felt small, pitiful, fragile. Logan's hand found Ivy's again. He looked at her, and for a fleeting moment the hardness in his eyes melted. Then he turned back to the room. "The reading isn't over," he said. "Now we begin the reckoning." And with that, the hall seemed to shrink around them, its golden chandeliers no longer symbols of wealth but of judgment, shining down on those who had mocked the woman who now stood as the rightful heir. When the heavy oak doors closed behind the last disgraced heir, silence finally settled over the grand hall. The clinking of glasses, the sharp laughter, the sneers, all were gone. What remained was only truth, bare and undeniable. 3 figures still sat among the sea of empty chairs. Not loud cousins, not investors, not socialites in silk or diamonds. Just 3 ordinary people who had not joined in the cruelty. Sarah Ellis, the nurse who had once witnessed Logan and Ivy exchange vows, her eyes wet with quiet relief. Michael Reed, the librarian, who had recognized Ivy the moment she walked in but chose respect over spectacle. And Anna, the humble groundskeeper, who had quietly offered Ivy a glass of water before the reading began, without a single question or insult. Logan's gaze softened as he looked at them. "These are the ones who saw her worth," he said, his voice steady, carrying across the cavernous hall. Not her clothes, not her silence, not her bag. They saw her. And that is family. Ivy turned, her hazel eyes resting on the three who remained. She took a slow breath, her voice calm but edged with sorrow. "I didn't want to be right," she said. "I wanted them to be better." The words hung in the air, heavier than any judgment. The chandeliers gleamed overhead, their golden light no longer a crown for the arrogant but a quiet witness to humility and truth. Logan reached for Ivy's hand again, a gesture that needed no explanation. She leaned into him slightly, her faded cardigan brushing his sleeve. The simplest of touches worth more than all the jewels scattered across the marble floor. The estate was vast, the fortune unimaginable, but in that moment neither Logan nor Ivy cared for wealth. What mattered was what had been revealed, who stood when there was nothing to gain and who tore others down the first chance they had. Outside, the April hills glowed green beneath the soft sky. Inside, the estate was finally quiet, no greed, no sneers, no pretenses, just truth. The narrator's voice closes the story like the final note of a symphony. A simple woman. Humiliated at first, but in the end, she inherited everything. Not because of fortune, not because of status, but because love and truth outlast greed. Her silence was never weakness, it was strength. And in that strength, she revealed the true worth of everyone around her.